start. Hi everyone, it's so nice to see so many of you, and thank you for those that were able to come to the community iftar last Monday, which was brilliant, and yeah, excited to see you all. Is anyone here that hasn't come before? I see a couple. But just to give you a reminder, welcome, of what this is about. So after we had our crazy election last year in June, I think many of us found that quite galvanizing and connected with each other and just wanted to keep seeing each other. And, you know, are interested in politics, are interested in debate, and this monthly meeting was created in order for us to have those discussions, and we've been really lucky with speakers so far, talking about Palestine. There's no one shouting at anyone outside today, which is good. It's a sign we're doing something right. Yeah, I've just been in conversation with Harjun Chang, who's the really famous economist, and we're just trying to work out a date for him to come in, Gary Stevenson, so just watch my emails, he's gonna come soon. Just trying to find a spot in his diary. It might end up having not been the last Monday of the month, but anyway, we'll see. This is also not the last Monday of the month, because next Monday may be Eid. So Eid Mubarak ahead of time for those celebrating. Okay, so today we're talking about immigration. There's probably no other issue that gets more bad attention in our politics than the issue of immigration. And you know, this turnout today is just a reminder that there are so many of us that don't agree with the dominant narratives, that don't agree with the policies, and that want to see a different type of politics, an attitude, a narrative about immigration. So that gives me some hope seeing you here. We're really lucky to have Zoe Gardner join us today. Hiya. I actually, you know when you've seen someone on TV so much and you kind of think you know them, and then I think I saw you at a party. Oh God, I think it might have been the Labour Party.
It was the Labour Party.
I saw you and I was like, oh hi, and then you were like,
no. I was gobsmacked and starstruck.
No, anyway, and so I've been a huge fan of what Zoe has to say, and I just love that she looks annoyed, you know, like she brings some emotion to the discussions about it. You know, we've got every right to be angry and annoyed, and I personally think it's okay to show that and good to show that. So there's quite a lot to talk about. We're going to do the usual thing. We'll talk for about half an hour, and then we'll have a little get a tea, chat to each other, and then we'll do a Q&A until about 9:15. Okay, so let's start with something that is unusual in the immigration discussion, which is the facts. Can you tell us, are we, and this happened to me on the doorstep, there's so many immigrants coming that this island could sink. Are we there?
Not quite there. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it's really great to see so many of you here. I met maybe one or two of you knocking on doors for Faiza this summer, but yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you for asking about the facts, because it is rare that I get to point out some of the things that actually underlie this horrible conversation about migration. So net immigration to the UK has been unusually high for a couple of years for a lot of reasons that we can get into. It's starting to come down now very quickly. So it's 20% lower in 2024 than it was in 2023. It was 728,000 though, still very, very high. But I think what's really important within that is that 37,000 people came on a small boat. And I have a calculator. I'm not very good at maths, but I have a calculator, unlike most newspaper editors apparently, and I can work out that that means that 5% of immigration to the UK last year were people coming on small boats crossing the channel, 5%. So it's just, the conversation might be slightly disproportionately geared towards focusing on those particularly vulnerable people.
And of those others, what is that made up of? Is that sort of, because I often get annoyed because I think that's loads of care workers, people being invited in to do work that needs to get done.
Yeah, so of the others, it's the biggest group is actually students.
Right.
So students were around 340,000.
But they leave again.
They do, yeah. So actually, in fact, almost all the migrants we're going to talk about are on temporary visas of one kind or another. So people think, oh, students, they come, they go. Actually, almost all people, even if they come to work, will be on a temporary visa and potentially will go, potentially will then stay and renew a visa and stay longer term. But we're always talking about migrants on temporary visas. But yeah, so students are the biggest group. Then you have workers. So there's a lot of different categories of work visas. One of the tropes that the right are putting out at the moment is that only a small percentage of people come on work visas, but they're only talking about the kind of visa that says the word work in the title. But that is a small minority of the number of people who come here actually for work purposes, but the title of their visa says something else. So it's very, very distorted, but about 275,000 people came last year for work. And then the next category is family members, so people joining up with people who already live here in the UK long term.
Right. So, given that, I mean, I remember, I was just trying to find it. I wrote this report back in like 2010 or something called Why the Cap Won't Fit, because at that time, as we've seen for many years, the government was going very hard on having a number that they were going to meet and having a cap on migration, which of course, the Tories failed at every time. Why is it that politicians keep failing in their number one aim often to lower immigration?
Yeah, well, essentially because if you wanted to put a cap on immigration at the moment, you could do it tomorrow. You could say we're only going to issue 50,000 visas next year, and you only issue 50,000 visas next year, and a few more asylum seekers would come, but essentially you'd drastically reduce numbers. What you'd also do is completely decimate our public services in one fell swoop, and the economy to boot. And we wouldn't have any new teachers, and we wouldn't have nurses, and we wouldn't have care workers, and all these different people that we desperately need. So instead of doing that, and you'll see David Cameron, odd decision to give himself a cap and just never reach it by never implementing that policy of limiting the number of visas. Other than that, it's usually politicians in opposition who call for a cap. Because if you're actually in government, you don't want to put a cap on because, as I say, you'd have to solve other problems then that are created by not having enough immigrants. So instead of actually cutting the numbers, what they do repeatedly is they cut migrants' rights. So, for example, they cut the rights of care workers to come to the UK with their spouse and children under the age of 18. So they still want the labour of the care workers, but they do not believe that they have the right to live with their family members and loved ones when they're caring for our family members and loved ones. So that's what they've repeatedly done, and this is why you will always fail to reach a numerical target, because you're not setting a numerical target. You're cutting people's rights so that you can perform, like, look, we're cutting numbers, we're doing this horrible thing to migrants. In fact, all you're doing is creating a class of people who have fewer and fewer rights.
So just thinking through, so the cap is something that's been dropped by the Labour government. I think one of the ways in which we're telling people about this event is someone, I don't know if he's here, Simon, he sent us this picture of a Labour MP who said, my main priority is closing the Asylum Hotel, the local Asylum Hotel. This is my main number one priority, shut this hotel. Can you talk us through sort of the key tenets of Labour Party policy?
Oh, yeah. Well, I assume people in this room will be amenable to hearing. I've been surprised at how bad it's been. I mean, essentially, they have this overarching thing. They promised that numbers would come down, right? That isn't connected to sort of any of our needs as a society, and it isn't connected to any of the needs of migrants and people on the move. It's just arbitrary. Numbers must come down. We don't know till when, till what point, unless X, Y, or Z. It just must come down. That's the overarching imperative. And so what they're doing, and numbers are coming down, to be clear, because the extremely high numbers that we've seen over the last few years were created by very specific circumstances. So one was the opening of a quite big care worker visa pathway. Then it was the Ukraine resettlement. It was the Hong Kong resettlement. And it was a bounce back in student and worker numbers following the pandemic. All of those, again, as I say, temporary migrants, it was projected to come down. It is coming down. So they are going to achieve the coming down part. Unfortunately, they don't seem to have confidence in themselves on anything, but very specifically, they're terrified of the right-wing narrative around migration. And so they don't, from what I've seen, they don't have the confidence that those numbers that are already coming down naturally, it's going to be enough, or it's going to allow them to show enough of this hostility that they're trying to project. So they are also pursuing a symbolic set of policies that are designed to demonstrate a hostility towards migration without really achieving very much. So things like denying the right of refugees who have come through irregular means to the UK from ever obtaining citizenship. It's just a horrific policy. It's just a symbolic policy, though, because people who arrive in the UK through irregular means, they then go through the asylum system that takes an average of 2 years. Then we're talking about people whose claims are accepted, so they are recognised as having fled from persecution and they have the right to remain in the UK. Then after 5 years on a refugee visa, they can apply for indefinite leave to remain. And after another year after that, they were previously allowed to apply for citizenship. So all you're doing is taking away that step at the end. You're not talking about people who will now leave or disappear or won't come in the first place. You're talking about refugees who live in our communities for the long term, but
they'll never
as a symbol, they will never truly belong and never truly be one of us. That's, I think, very emblematic of what Labour's doing at the moment. It's very symbolic, and it's signposting all the wrong things.
They also talk quite a lot about their deportation numbers, which again, I guess, is the narrative point, isn't it? It's that they feel like they have to project a narrative about immigration that it's a bad thing. But I wonder, just hearing you say, numbers are going to come down, even if that, plays into the idea that immigration is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a problem that the narrative is consistently put around the numbers. Mm-hmm. So Labour has this aim to bring numbers down. The Tories say it should be even lower, and Reform says it should be lower still. And every time that in mainstream debates about this, and I'm asked, well, where should the number be? And frankly, I don't care. And I think that is important to communicate. I don't care if it's higher, I don't care if it's lower. What I care about is that it is managed well. Mm. And at the moment, because we're too busy talking about whether the number should be this high or this low or this low, we're not talking about how to manage a system well that helps people to get the best out of migration, both who are coming here and our communities, and how we can make that work for us over the long term. And instead, we're just talking about numbers, which frankly, like a good system can manage a lot higher numbers without problems, and a bad system can't manage even low numbers well. Mm. So we should be.
Is it not though? Because recently I was on Politics Live with a Labour MP, and I, on the show, kind of accused them of becoming very reform-like on some of these issues.
I saw the clip.
And afterwards he goes, we have to do that. Is it? And there's a sense that, because Britain hates immigrants. I mean, do we hate immigrants? Do they have to do that?
Do you hate immigrants? No, we don't hate immigrants. I think, so I try not to be cynical, generally speaking. I've started to develop a slightly cynical perspective on this, though. So on the one hand, I think that there's plenty of them who genuinely are just so scared of reform. They see the ascendancy of far-right politics. They've seen the Tory party be destroyed by it, and they really do think that they need to show that they are tough on migration. Those people have not done the reading, and I and others are trying to explain to them, it's very, very clear from all the research, all the history, all of the experience we have, that if you echo the anti-migrant talking points of the far right, you only strengthen the vote of the right. You lose those voters because they see you agree that immigration is bad, and they see that guy's going to do more about it. And we saw this in the States, Kamala Harris was doing 24/7 deportations of families, and nobody believed that was enough because Trump just sounded tougher on immigration, and so they should have, and I'm not saying it's easy, right? I'm not saying it's not easy to turn this around and create, But the fact is that most people actually just want to see migration managed well. It's incredible the strength of the reasonable opinion towards migration, given the onslaught, constant demonization that we get in the media. Most people in this country just want to see it managed well. And that's where the cynicism comes in, because some of them are scared of reform and think that they have to do this. Some of them think that it would be good for reform to be strengthened over the next 4 years, because that will split the right vote between the Tories and Reform, and that will make anybody halfway decent scared into voting Labour in order to keep out Reform. So I think there is also that side of it, and both of those are playing together.
Yeah, I did read something over the weekend that Morgan McSweeney had said that he expects sort of progressive voters to feel they have to vote Labour because of the threat from Reform. So, interesting to hear you say that. I guess I'm thinking, given all of this, the kind of question we put for this event was like, how does this hurt us? And I'm always struck by, things like the community iftar, and you see the sense of community across race, across class, across immigration status, and you realise that actually it's not as bad. I'd hate to live in Nigel Farage's Britain, because his idea is that we all hate each other, when in reality in communities we don't. But the data shows that where people aren't exposed as much to immigrants, then they're more likely to have anti-immigration stances. So just kind of thinking through where we go from here, and how do we make the argument that this hurts us, that this immigration narrative, Labour playing into it, it's not helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really key, and that's why I was so happy when you came forward with this sort of title for the event, because I think those of us who maybe know migrants, or maybe just view politics through a human rights framework or whatever, and are supporting the rights of migrants. We support the rights of migrants very much because we believe that those people have rights and should be treated with respect and should have the same opportunities as others. And we therefore don't want to make an argument for immigration that's about benefit to the UK, because it is very uncomfortable, and we shouldn't justify immigration policies off the back of what we need and can extract from migrants. However, I think we've allowed that to stop us from talking about mutual need and how our country also needs migrants, and that our communities need migrants because we are getting older. Our social contract, our pensions, our welfare state depends more and more of the arrival of younger, generally speaking, migrants into the economy, and without them, the opposite of how Reform present migrants as a threat to the NHS and the welfare state. Without immigration, our welfare state cannot survive. Absolutely cannot survive with an ageing population that we have. So I think we need to be willing to talk about mutual need. There are people who need to come here for opportunity, for safety, to join family, for a life that they want to build. We also need these people, and that is what community is, right? It's people who support each other in different kinds of ways, and not shy away from that, and obviously not talk about it in an extractive way, that they can come and we can take something from them. They need rights within that, but we need to recognise that this is something that benefits us, and that conversation really needs to start happening, because this ageing population thing is really serious, and it's what's impacting, the fact that the NHS is struggling so much. We don't have the care service that we need. We don't have, you can keep putting more money into the NHS. If our population keeps aging, more people will need healthcare. They deserve that care. We need to have a model that can reflect that and can continue to provide. So I think we need to not shy away from that narrative of mutual need.
I guess people then, it was quite striking even to hear from Starmer that the difference in attitudes towards, say, Ukrainians coming or people from Hong Kong. So there's some immigrants that are okay. Why do you think that is? And actually, when you see a lot of the discussion around immigration and the responses, you'll see social media things where, you know, people, it's basically Islamophobia that's really playing out. I mean, and essentially there's racism and Islamophobia. So it's like, we might need workers for the NHS, but we can get them from countries that aren't Black or Muslim, because these people are fundamentally changing our culture. And that is a really difficult, I mean, that's where reform is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where also, you know, this hyper fixation on the relatively small numbers of people coming in boats versus the much higher numbers of people coming from Ukraine or Hong Kong, for example. Like, there is a reason why they have been made the focus, is because they're much more easy to demonize and to other. I've been looking at I've been working on a project that involves me looking at sort of the history of the last century or so of immigration lawmaking. And the way, you know, the quotes we have from conservative politicians, Labour politicians, newspapers, commentators and so on about Jewish immigrants and refugees who came at the end of the 1800s, start of the 1900s, it's word for word what they say about Muslims now. It is word for word what they say about Muslims now. And so it is a tale of as old as time to scapegoat in racist ways and other that is perceived as poorer, as basically a burden, which is again why I think this narrative of mutual need comes from. But I think also this narrative of being able to pick and choose. We may need immigrants, but we get to choose who. And we need to
model immigrants from Hong Kong.
Yeah, we need to fight that as hard as we possibly can, because the truth is, the real honest to God's truth is, people need to come here and we don't get to choose who those people are. And it just simply, we do not actually have as much control over who comes here as any politician will make you believe. Like, people move is a fundamental fact of life. And there is nothing that any hard right government has ever done to achieve a stopping of that. So what we need to do is make the system work so that the people who need to move can then bring that benefit that we need, rather than imagining that we can pick and choose, no, those people over here, because it's just a fantasy. It doesn't exist. And yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of racism in the conversation about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I struggle so much with, I mean, the way you've put it is great, but I remember when I first started working in the think tank world in like 2006 or something, there was a big push because of Eastern European migration and the way that was being spoken about, which was horrendous. There was a big push to talk about, they put in more taxes than they take out in public services, which I remember even at that time, I was like, I don't think this is a good way to go. Because they were young. So you're saying that as soon as they get pregnant, we should send them back? I mean, what's it? You know, that was very transactional, and that was coming from the left, centre left. That was the sorts of arguments that they were using, and I think it really hurt us.
Yeah, I think this is where that tension exists between, an extractive conversation about us needing immigrants and a conversation about like communities that need and support one another. And it's a difficult balance, because, you know, it is factually the case that on average, immigration brings in more to the economy than it takes out. However, very, very important fundamental fact that is too often forgotten in a conversation about immigration is that immigrants are human beings, which means they grow old, they get sick, they have families. I think actually most people do understand that, and if it's put in those terms, you know, people have families, people want to think about, you know, I want to know my neighbours, right? That's one of the things people want. They want to know their community. Like, events like this is so great. People want to know their community, feel secure in their community, feel like they know their neighbours. British people, largely, there are exceptions to this, but largely don't care if their neighbours are, you know, Muslim or have black skin or whatever. They just want to know them and feel secure. Now, what you have if you have a transactional immigration system, or like one that we have at the moment, where everybody has a temporary status and people aren't entitled to live with their family members and people aren't entitled to access the welfare state, the NHS, which we're going to hear about from patients, not passports, people who are in the room here, like, that creates well, that's anti-integration, and integration, another sort of like bad word on the left. But integration can just mean like the ability to like fully live in your community and be a part of it, right? Integrated communities are a good thing. Those are hampered by a transactional approach to immigration policy.
One thing, I mean, there's been some positive case studies like Sanchez in Spain, which they've made quite a positive case for immigration and it's helped their economy, and they talk a lot about that. But in general, the rise of reform like far right and issues about immigration are coming up in all sorts of places. It's not just a problem that we have. Does that show that it's just a very difficult issue to solve? What does that tell us, do you think?
I think the main thing that it tells us is that like migration is inherently obviously an international issue. And so the UK could not have, sadly, a brilliant immigration system while France continued to have the immigration system that it has now. It just wouldn't work well. We could definitely do a lot better, right? But essentially, this has to be achieved internationally, and it definitely has to be achieved within the region, especially the management of asylum seekers. So I think seeing that, this far-right politics is on the rise across the whole of Europe, that's no surprise, because it feeds on each other, and it reinforces each other's messages, and it reinforces the need for, like, it creates the crisis that it then exploits, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, asylum seekers being pushed from pillar to post throughout Europe and so on, and everybody saying, oh, you touched it last, it's not my responsibility, right? That creates the crisis, that creates the very visible problem that then people think, oh, these people shouldn't be here, whereas actually the answer is, no, the system should manage it better, but that has to be achieved internationally. So I think Spain is a really important example for us to be looking to. It's not perfect. Spanish border policy is actually quite horrific. But once you are in Spain, they have a much more positive approach, both rhetorically and, also, like, I mean, asylum seekers have the right to work very quickly. They also, like, match training opportunities to shortage occupation areas for asylum seekers to be able to find work in areas where there's not enough workers and so on. So that's also in the context of a socialist government that, for example, or a more socially socialistly inclined nation where the problems of housing, which they do have there, are seen much more through a lens of Airbnb, and multiple property owners are exploiting the housing market and creating, like, a rise in rents. Whereas here, we don't talk about who's actually benefiting from the housing crisis financially. We talk about the other people who are fighting with us for the housing at the bottom of the ladder. So I think Spain has a head start on us, but we need to look to the fact that, like I was saying, it's not easy, but Sanchez has realised, it's again, politicians, they're cynical in some ways sometimes. Like, he's sometimes, not all of them. But he's realised also, like, following the right means that you lose on the left. That's what happens. That's what we're seeing over and over again. Look at Germany, look at the US, you know. He's decided, like, okay, well, I've got to try the other way. He wants to stay in power, so he's providing an alternative narrative and hoping he can get the best out of it. And frankly, I hope he gets the best out of it too, because it's got to be an example.
You mentioned housing there, and I think, of course, some of this is a resource fight, right? This is basically the way in which we talk about the economy, in which, you know, cynical politicians want to say, oh, the reason why we haven't sorted out housing or jobs, we are sorting it out, it's just there's too much immigration, essentially. So I wonder how you connect this to, like, how the economy is working, and kind of more broadly, you know, we've spoken a little bit about narrative change, like more broadly what needs to be done. Yeah,
I've been thinking about this a lot. Does anyone know the name of the richest man in Britain? No, I mean, like, most rooms I ask that question to don't. And we don't know the names of the people who are the major shareholders of the water companies or the electric companies. We don't know the people who own the media, even though there's only about 5 of them. We don't have a good narrative of who the actual enemy who is taking things from us is. It's very easy to think it's a Muslim man. because we can all picture that Muslim man. We've all been told about that Muslim man, a huge amount. We haven't been told much about your Paul Marshall, who owns most of GB News and The Spectator and is
Duke of Westminster.
Yeah, or it's a man called Jack Radcliffe, the richest man in the UK. Any idea? No, I'm not. I think we need to have a better narrative about who's actually taken something from us. Like these people who own the water companies, they have names, faces. I think we should know who they are. I think they should be a bit more famous than the Muslim immigrant.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of thinking through policy, what is it you would do on, what would you say to Yvette Cooper? I mean, what would your advice be?
She always takes my calls. Yeah. Well, look, where to start? There's a few changes I would make. I think a lot of what Yvette Cooper's doing now, a lot of what Labour's doing now, like I say, it's symbolic. It's about looking busy. It's not going to achieve anything.
Well, it's also about playing to the rights.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're worried Reform is second in 89 of their seats. They want to be like, no, we're really hard on immigration.
Yeah. Look, we've deported a person. I mean, it's like there's no one who is tempted by the Reform Party who thinks that Labour has deported enough people or ever will. Like, it's not going to get you anywhere. I think like the racism that underlies this conversation so often, like I want to remind people that if we did, this couldn't happen, right? But say we completely stopped all immigration tomorrow, the demographic change in the UK that means that white people are going to be a slightly smaller majority over time, that's still baked in, I'm afraid. That's happening anyway. Ships actually sailed towards us from the Commonwealth many centuries ago. It's just a fact that's baked in. So if you're talking about preventing this, this great replacement that they're scared of, and you're not actually talking about stopping immigration. You're talking about going door to door and deporting people whose home has been here for generations, but who aren't white and who are Muslim or whatever. That is actually what is required.
Or making sure that black and white people don't have kids together.
Well, yeah.
Right?
What's the biggest growing minority ethnicity in the UK?
Yeah.
It's mixed. We love each other far more than we hate each other. But it's. I think that we need to really, really point out that they cannot go far enough for these people. Labour cannot go far enough for these people. I heard them say, we need people to see the impact of our deportations on the street. I'm sorry, what do you mean exactly? Like, what does walking down the street and seeing the impact of deportations look like? Like, get them to spell it out. That is what is required to satisfy this. It cannot be satisfied. Labour cannot satisfy the truly anti-migrant racist politics in our country. And by feeding it, they are creating their own demise. And so there are so many things that you can do to change the immigration system towards one that creates, like I say, these integrated communities where people can put down roots, can stay for the long term, where people are not forced into poverty by policies like no recourse to public funds, which basically means that immigrants cannot access the welfare state at all. All these things actually have an evidence basis for making things better for our entire communities. But what we have is, again and again, like I say, they're not cutting numbers, they're cutting people's rights. And that creates a class of people who are more easily exploited, more likely to be poor, more likely to be in squalid accommodation. And those are all things that people don't want to see in their communities. And it creates a really negative feedback loop. So I would just beg Yvette Cooper to look at the evidence. But yeah.
Great, I think that's a good point to pause, and going to take your questions. I know a few people already emailed me saying they had some thoughts, so that's good. And I know that the Justice for Omisha people are here. Do you want to just say something before? Terry, do you want to say something about this? Or yeah? Do you want to say? Come to the front. Quickly say something. Hey, Terry.
Thanks. Yeah, just in terms of practical things that we can do. People may or may not know that in this country at the moment, anyone whose immigration status isn't absolutely perfect in all the paperwork, you are charged for hospital care and you have to pay up front before you're given that care. And even if you go into accident and emergency, they will treat you as an emergency, but they'll still charge you for it afterwards. And just living not very far away from here is a little girl called Omisha and her parents and sister. She has, when she was just under 1 year old, she was diagnosed with a rare form of liver cancer, and she eventually had to have a liver transplant. And her mum and dad would charge £76,000 for that liver transplant. And they didn't have a catch chance in hell of paying that bill, and they haven't got a catch chance in hell of paying that bill. And we, in Patient Not Passports, we campaign against, not just for Omisha, Justice for Omisha, she's just our local example, and she's a gorgeous girl, and hopefully she will live to be 18. But even though we've already succeeded in getting that debt suspended, so they are no longer pursuing her parents with debt collectors and terrifying them. I mean, because that's what was happening. They've suspended the debt, but that debt still exists. And when Omisha is 18, that debt will still be hanging over her head. And so I'm just appealing really to anybody who is interested in getting involved in a sort of very concrete, practical campaign locally. But clearly the longer term vision is that we get Yvette Cooper and the Labour government to repeal the legislation that says that migrants should be charged. Because the other thing about the migrant charging in hospitals is that it's the opening wedge. They've put in place the systems to charge migrants who they deem to not be ordinarily resident. But now those systems are in place, you wait. The next thing, there'll be another group that gets charged for healthcare and another group that gets charged for healthcare. So this is a very important issue to sort of take a stance on. But it's also, in terms of those people that Zoe was talking about, who do care, who are decent people, it's just a very great way of getting people to make a stance and say, no, we're not going to have this little girl and her parents treated like that. So anybody who'd like to get involved in our local Waltham Forest Redbridge campaign, come and talk to me and Ros. Ros, wave your hand. She's at the back there. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And Terry's involved in so many different campaigns. It's so impressive. Thank you. So if you want to get a cup of tea and have a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and take some questions. Do speak to each other. This is the part of this thing, is to build community and connection with each other. So thank you. Okay, great. Let's get started. Okay, let's start here.
My name's Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Look, it's maybe not a appropriate question to ask at this time, but it may be straying off the subject a bit, but I'm disturbed in the things in general, because it's when is the left going to be united and put up a fight against the current trajectory way it's going, such as the right wing and the people that seem to be accepting their lot in life and not doing anything about it. And
No, I hear you.
I feel very disenchanted.
No, thank you. It's a question that always comes up. It's an important question.
Another question.
Yeah.
Turn yours off in the meantime.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hi, one of the people you spoke about before came on as a student. I ended up staying. I'm from Italy, and the government in Italy is also putting very strong messages against immigration. And my question is partly inspired by what they're doing over there, but it touches on your argument on mutual needs. And the question is, how do you square your argument about mutual needs with populist far-right policies and their argument about, for example, pro-natalist policies? We should fund the NHS, we should train British people to become nurses, and so on and so forth. Yeah, thanks.
Great question, thank you. And who was it? Oh, okay.
Hi. The sponsorship deals of the past, will it be introduced by the government in the future? An employer looking for employees. Can't you do some immigrants? You can't find an increase in local population. Find somebody else, an immigrant.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Do sponsorship, does that still exist as a model?
It does exist, yeah. Okay, I'll go straight to that one. So, like, sponsorship is now the main form of immigration to the UK. So the problem with it is it's a very restrictive form of sponsorship. It's if you're talking about it in terms of like a business that needs to employ people and can't recruit, is not finding it easy to recruit within the UK, then they have to, or the bureaucratic requirements are really, really onerous, and the fees, both on the migrants themselves and on the business that is seeking to recruit migrant workers, are extremely high. So while the model is based on sponsorship, and maybe I'll get to that, but I have a lot of problems with a model where somebody's right to be in the UK is dependent on the sponsorship of their boss. I think it creates a negative power dynamic where there already is always obviously a bad power dynamic with your boss. But yeah, there are also a lot of additional bureaucratic problems that makes it not a very good system for employers either. And I think a better system would be, for example, a true points-based system where if you speak English, have connections to the UK like family or having studied here in the past or something like that, and you have various skills, we can set the points that you get for different skills like experience working in care or whatever other shortage area occupation. Then you can obtain a visa on that basis and participate in the labour market on an equal basis to everybody else. I think that's a preferable model to a sponsorship one where you come and then you can only be here because you're sponsored by an employer, and if you piss off your boss, essentially it's bad.
So that leads to people being trapped, yeah?
Yeah, it can lead to people being trapped in exploitative work, which has happened a lot with care workers.
This point about we should train young people.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like again, this is a framing issue about nobody I've ever met disagrees with training up British people to be doctors. In fact, even the politicians who cut the funding to train British people to be doctors seem to agree with training British people to be doctors. We all agree with that. Proportionately speaking, though, back in the 80s, we had 4.3 working people per pensioner. We now have 3 working people per pensioner, and we are moving quickly towards 2. Now, I'm actually not against, pro-natalist policies in the sense of like better childcare and better rights for, childbearing parents and shared parental leaves and all of that. Pro-natalist politics, again, it's not something I'm against British people having bigger families. I think that would actually be good, and longer term we should look at that. But it cannot.
Do you know how much childcare is?
I know, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, provide the childcare, mate. Come on. But that doesn't unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it just simply doesn't replace the need that we have right now for more people to provide the labour and the services that are supporting our elderly and vulnerable populations. It's just factual maths that we need more people faster than we can give birth. Yeah.
And then there was a question, I think a lot of people feel this, including me, like a frustration with the left. Yeah.
Where's the left?
Yeah.
This one actually hits home a little bit for me. It really, it bothers me. You know what? I think in a lot of ways the left is demoralised. We're losing, so that doesn't feel good. I also think specifically on this issue, there's a problem because people on the left essentially don't care about migration that much, right? The people who really care about migration are the people who don't like it on the right. People on the left don't care about migration, they care about wages, they care about the welfare state, they care about poverty and opportunity and housing and all of these other things, the environment, right? And I really want to shake people sometimes, those who have a platform to talk about politics on the left, and to remind people that unfortunately right now, if we don't win on immigration, we're not going to win anything. Right? If we can't win the argument on immigration,
absolutely.
There's no use talking about the environment or the welfare state or housing or whatever, because we've lost on immigration, and so we will lose every election to come, every opportunity to gain power. If we don't win against the racism, then I'm afraid your wonderful water bill or whatever it is, naming no names, is useless. And won't do us any good. So I share your frustration. I think people are demoralised. I think people don't have a political expression for their there's no party that's representing people with left-wing views at the moment, and I think we need to rebuild, and I think we're getting there. We have years before the next election. We've got loads of time to challenge Labour to be more left-wing before we ever need to worry about who we vote for. And we have repeatedly relied on having one leader that we put all our eggs in their basket, and they will always fail us. And like that, this is the left, actually. This is just ordinary people who, with ordinary lives, who show up to things and support each other and talk about issues and might join this campaign, or go along to support another thing, or just do the shopping for a neighbour who needs that help that week or whatever. That's actually where the left is, and we've got to remember that. Give ourselves a bit of a break. Stop self-criticising constantly. We're on the back foot because the millionaires and the billionaires are with the right. That's why. It's nothing we've done wrong. But we need to just be there for each other and build from the ground up, I think.
And that's what we're doing here. And yeah, just to say, I think it's a really good way to put it. As someone that's worked on the economy for a really long time, I've just seen this issue kind of separated out. And I'm always saying to people, you cannot divorce the economic from the social, and this is the problem that is coming up again and again. And when I worked with governments around the world, and we kept losing governments that we were working with because they were centre or centre-left governments that we were working with, or left or centre-left. And like Sweden, they lost on immigration. They were doing loads of good things on material conditions, actually, handling the cost of living crisis quite well, but they lost on immigration because they would play into it or say nothing. And so this is, I think that's completely true. Okay, next round of questions. Oh, there was this guy here who's been waiting. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chigo. Just inquiring in regards to people facing deportation cases with legal aid not being existent in regards to supporting their cases. Do you think that's been diabolically implemented to prevent deportees from having the high probability of winning immigration cases in the UK?
Good question, thank you.
My name's Dave. I'm really looking for some advice on how to argue the case for immigration, or counter some of the really negative narratives around it. Specifically, I'm thinking about discussions that I have with my in-laws frequently, and I sometimes I just think I'm terrible at arguing. Well, and I can't across the subject completely know all the facts and everything. But it often boils down to the immigration comes at the expense of everybody else. So. And then they blame it on things like waiting times with the NHS, access to housing, and all these sorts of things which you can't argue against because they're there, but it's not the fault of immigrants. But just some advice on key points, how to kind of deal with those sort of arguments.
And then one more.
Steve, my question is similar to the last one. You started off with quoting some facts about immigration, and like the last speaker, I have trouble arguing the case and saying it's not as bad as is being represented. Is there any kind of website that does deal with facts, and the website is kind of official in some way that we can actually access and then use, and also show to people that this is the thing? Thanks.
Great question. So in terms of people facing deportation, it's dire at the moment. As you say, legal aid just simply doesn't exist for people in these circumstances. And one of the things that's a problem there, the people you're talking about are at the sharpest end of this, right? But it's a problem for everyone in the immigration system. It's also a problem for the Home Office in terms of implementation of its immigration system, is that it is Byzantine levels of complex. And you cannot navigate it on your own without competent legal representation. And a very significant proportion, right? Like, so I think we should change the rules around who should be able to access the right to a secure status in the UK. But even without changing those rules, a lot of the people who are facing deportation, a lot of the people who are undocumented, who are subject to the hostile environment, if they had high quality legal representation at an early stage in their case, would never have got into that circumstance and would never and would be able to access a right under the existing laws to remain in the UK. But they are priced out of legal representation, and it's a scandal. And it is just one of the basic tenets of a functioning state is access to, competent legal representation regardless of your ability to pay. And I think that we all understand that as a society when we're talking about healthcare, but we don't understand it when we're talking about legal rights and the right to have a competent lawyer represent you. And that's a problem because we view the people who need a lawyer as probably a criminal, right? But actually most people who need a lawyer are not a criminal, whether in the immigration system or out of it. So I think that we need really to push for a better. There's actually a group that's campaigning specifically on legal aid that I don't know if they have a name as such, but they're doing a lot around the rates and to raise the rates and raise the quality of representation under legal aid. So maybe I could put you in touch with them. But it is a real struggle because legal aid has a bad reputation and people who need it. I mean, people at the sharp end of the deportation, we're fighting for we used to be on ground, a few years ago we were on ground where mainstream major MPs would speak up against deportations. That's not happening anymore. We've lost a lot of ground on that front and it's brutal to see.
Yeah, I actually had a good friend. She used to do my eyebrows. She got deported because she didn't have a good lawyer. And it was really sad. All of a sudden, I was texting her and she just vanished.
But I mean, it reflects the fact that it's a fundamentally classist system, right? It's hatred of immigrants. We don't hate all immigrants, certainly not the rich ones. But if you can't afford to navigate the system, then we demonise you.
Then the other ones were basically on making the argument, and is there somewhere we can get the facts? Because it was that lady that said to me in the doorstep, this island's going to sink soon because of all the people coming on the boats. People think there's 1 million people coming every year. But it's just it is good to be able to just go straight to somewhere and be this is actually the figures.
Yeah, so those are really important questions. I get them all the time, and this is going to be obviously I can't give you all the answers for things that might come up right now. But first of all, it's a really authoritative and good website, the Migration Observatory. So it's a research centre based at the University of Oxford. It's very impartial. But luckily the facts are on our side. So, if you search their website, they will have a briefing on absolutely anything, and they present it quite clearly with sort of the top lines and the most important statistics at the top. So it's a really useful resource. That 5% of people came on boats last year. I think that's just a stat that needs to get out there more. But I think in general on that point, and follow me on everything. I'm on everything, and I do videos about this stuff all the time. So hopefully that can help with the arguments, and you can ask me if there's particular topics you want me to address. But I think the thing to remember, something that almost never happens, is that you have a conversation with your in-laws or somebody else who disagrees with you on this issue, and you're so scintillatingly persuasive and on top of the facts that they go, yeah, you're right. It's never happened, right? Not Gary's economics, not Jeremy Corbyn, none of them's ever pulled that off. It's not a thing. So what does change minds is continuous engagement, right? Every time you talk to them, it might feel like you're smashing your head against a brick wall. It's not. They're not going to admit, oh God, you were right in front of you. They're not going to lose face that way. But if you manage to just engage them and talk honestly as a person and be like, I don't know all the facts, you don't know all the facts. I feel like, you've maybe swallowed some propaganda and maybe I have to, and maybe we can learn something about this together. Maybe we can look at this website together. I think you're talking about people, ordinary people, in a way that's that I don't recognise. Like, I don't think that's really true. And you talk to them honestly, and they will go away, and they'll think about it a bit, and they won't change their minds overnight either. But bit by bit, if you can, not, cut them off because they've got horrible views, even if they say something really nasty. Like, if you keep having those conversations with them and keep showing them that you haven't changed your mind about this, but you've learnt another thing and you'd like to share that with them, and they might not become socialist open borders activists, but I think they might. That's the only way that you will move them bit by bit. So keep having those conversations, and do not be down on yourselves if you come away from it thinking, well, I didn't win that argument, or I didn't persuade that. That's not how it works. Just keep talking to people. And what's way more persuasive than any of my statistics or my facts is how you feel about other people. And just like, I just think that people deserve a chance, and they're ordinary people like us. That's a far more persuasive thing than any of the stats, really.
So I had this with my father-in-law, who is an immigrant, but also, he's not going to watch this. I love him, he's great. But when I first met him, when I first started dating his son, he was anti-immigrant, and he would say things. I mean, I think one time he said to my face something like horrible about Muslims, and I just was like, I'm a Muslim. I mean, he's Turkish. I mean, I don't. Anyway, but like slowly over time, it is true. Like, and it wasn't really with facts. It was actually like saying about telling him about my friend, or just chatting to him, and then he, bless him, he started watching all my TV interviews, and then after like a couple of years, he said, I'm a lefty now. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, why? What happened? He said, you happened. So keep going. But yeah, I think humanising, this made me think, like, back when I used to run a think tank called Class, we used to do trainings on how to have the argument, and look at kind of a colleague of mine had put together the evidence, and how, emotional stories, connecting with people, just how much people, if they like you, how much they're more willing to listen. So yeah, I think maybe we should bring that back if people want to have some sessions on how, because I think someone asked me about another one as well. Was it Palestine something? People were like, I'd love to know how to have this conversation with people. Maybe we should do something like that locally. I think that could be really good. Okay, so 3 more questions. And Rosa needs to,
Yeah, we'll do Rosa.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The discriminatory...
Rosa, just introduce yourself, that you're a counsellor here.
I'm a counsellor.
Yeah.
An independent
Yes.
one. Rosa Gomez, independent counsellor for Redbridge Church. The discriminatory policy that Elmas is bringing out on the refugees who arrive in boats not to ever have access to British citizenship. Do you anticipate that there will be appeals on this, or even a judicial review? And that's one question. The other one is, are we following the footsteps of Donald Trump? Because yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, there was an immigration raid in Belfast, and they detained 76 migrants found to be working without a work permit.
I also thought that point you said about that people need to see it happening. Like right now in the US, people are just getting like picked up on the street. Like, is that the way they're hinting at? Yeah. Sorry, go on. Yep.
Sorry, I've got another one. Just wanted to add, ironically...
Rosa, did you have one more?
Right, this one.
Yeah.
Ironically, I presented a motion to Redbridge Council for the last, for the 20th of March, full council meeting, on refugee and citizenship. And it was rejected, because that does not affect the London Borough of Redbridge. So there's no more brown faces in Redbridge, or even Ukraine, or anyone.
No.
I just don't get it.
Yeah. Thanks, Rosa. All right, yeah, go.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ella. I just wanted to advertise the Anti-AIDS Network, which is a community organisation of people who try and intervene when they see the border police trying to intimidate people. That's number one, and that's a local organisation. I just wanted to ask, would you agree with me that if we had a legal, two things we need to fight for. One is to establish legal routes for asylum seekers, because that's the only way of eliminating the votes. And a right for asylum seekers to work, because if they can work, then they will, some of them land in years not being allowed to work or being exploited.
Two quickies will fit in, yeah?
Yeah, go.
Okay, I'm a quickie. Right. Hi, Richard One. Absolutely endorsing the anti-immigration rates. There's several of us who are on that. If you want to join the WhatsApp group, let me know. I can flash a QR code in front of you. Or go on. I think there's a website. I'm sure there's a website. Anyway, I think you're, thanks Zoe, really inspiring stuff. It's worth hearing again and again and again. The facts as an antidote. I think you're being too kind to this lot that are in power. I think they're nasty, venal people doing really cruel things, and the mask is slipping. My question, I'm an abolitionist, and my question really is, do we need a different discourse? I think you've hinted at it, in order to challenge this, because I worry that even if we adopt an oppositional position, we're still being drawn into this really cruel and divisive narrative that actually places value on people. Because it's often thought of as racist, and we challenge it on that in that modality, but actually you yourself talked, well actually it's Faiza, talked about pregnant women. Suddenly they've become less valuable, so they get deported, or someone with disability doesn't make it in the point system. Yeah, so the whole logic is one of devaluing people, whereas we know no human being is illegal. Yeah? So I would ask whether a truly universal human rights approach might be an antidote to this. Borders are relatively new. They're 120 or so years old with passports, etc. That whole system challenge it because the and the right of, I would say, champion the right of movement. Yeah, we don't talk about emigration anywhere near enough. Yeah, I go wherever I like. Fantastic. Yeah, people don't say, oh, hang on, you can't come to Mallorca. Yeah. For whatever reason. So we need to challenge that, yeah? So the right to movement. Thanks.
My name's Kevin. Looking at the numbers game, if this was a boxing match, the referee would have stopped it a long time ago, and Nigel Farage, Gert Wilders and Alice Bidell would have been counted out. Now, would you say that this is just a game that the right's playing, the globalists, because they don't care about the numbers of immigration? All they care about is putting the blame on the so-called left wing or the pro-migration people, purely because of power. If you look at Cameron's Brexit vote, he doesn't care about Brexit. What he cared about was knocking UKIP out, and therefore making sure the Tories regain power.
Yeah, great thought. Right, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so I'm going to inevitably forget the first one. Oh, the first one was about the citizenship and whether it's legal. Yeah, so...
Is it going to be challenged?
It seems very likely that the move to deny citizenship to refugees will be challenged in the courts. I think that's very likely, essentially on the basis that it's a pretty irrational description of what constitutes good character. If you're a refugee, you've been recognised as such, and the judge knows that as a refugee you had no other means of escape than through an irregular route, then it seems pretty irrational to characterise it, because that's the basis where they say, okay, it's the good character test that you have to pass to get citizenship, that somebody who travelled irregularly would not pass that test and therefore would not obtain citizenship. I think that's pretty irrational. I think that will be struck down in the courts, and I think it's an example of some of the problematic ways that the immigration system works, where the Home Secretary just has sweeping powers to do insane things that are based on sort of political pressures in the moment here or then, and very often does that without the requisite, legal advice, equalities impact assessments, and so on. This was what was revealed that led to the Windrush scandal, that those failures that created the Windrush scandal have not been fixed. And so, we get this completely irrational policy making. And while that one really disgusts me and therefore makes me really angry, it also is one that I'm a bit like, I think we'll get that knocked down. I think that won't stand up in court. I hope.
Just to say on the Labour Party, Rosa, blocking that motion at Redbridge Council, saying that it's not important for residents of Redbridge. I mean, that's just outrageous. I mean, obviously there's lots of refugees in Ilford and across Redbridge. So thank you, Rosa, for still trying to stand up for people and doing the right thing. And sorry that you are treated that way. And there's a by-election this week in that area where we're hoping an independent wins, and also just local council elections next year are going to be very important, but we'll talk about that another time. So the other questions, there's the two sort of questions related to how do we break with this narrative truly? I mean, right. Can we talk about open borders? What does that look like? And should we? And I really like the idea, calling for Raja. I remember after Brexit, they said that he was going to get a German passport through his wife.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are just absolute fraudsters.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the spirit of what both of you said in that part of the room. I think it goes a little bit to what I was saying when I was saying, why don't we know the names of all these people who actually own all the assets of our land, right? Like who have actually increased their wealth by huge amounts over the past decades, where all ordinary people, quote unquote, which I would never, I'm too political to be considered an ordinary person. Also, I live in London, therefore, count me out. Anyway, but ordinary people have been feeling the squeeze, and our mortgages have gone up, and our bills have gone up, and our grocery bills have gone up, and during that time, certain people have been getting very, very, very wealthy. And we don't know their names, and we don't focus on them, but they are the people who have an interest in pointing our attention towards migrants and refugees over and over and over again. And they are the people who benefit from it. So I think that when we're talking about changing the narrative, we have to, I don't know if you've seen recently this guy, Konstantin Kesin.
Oh my God, he was on Question Time with me.
I know, oh God, how could they bear to put him, anyway, the awful man. And then I saw, and I'm sure everyone in this room agrees, if you know who he is, he's very far right. He's, there being like, oh, even Rishi Sunak can't be English, and, really nasty man. But they were doing a profile on him in The Guardian because he'd spoken at one of these right-wing conferences. And I'm just like, I don't care. He's looking for a platform. Who paid him to speak at that conference? Who paid to put on that conference? That's who The Guardian should be doing a profile on. That's the person who doesn't want a profile done on them, right? So we need to and it is about talking about class as well, because you're right. Who can move, right? Who can move? And who do we punish for moving? Because ultimately, these people who are pursuing this racist conversation about immigration, they're not just talking about asylum seekers, they're talking about delivery drivers. The worst thing you could possibly be, apparently. Do they ever order a pizza? I don't know. It's this idea that a certain class of worker is totally expendable. We don't, and essentially what that's doing is it's again, if it did achieve its aims, which it can't do, but if it did achieve its aims, it would be segregating out those jobs that are low paid and despised in society for working class British people, which not great. But obviously, because it can't work, what it does is, again, and I'll say it again and again and again, and I think we need to really hammer this point home, is we are not reducing the numbers, because we still need delivery drivers, and we still need care workers, and we still need farm workers. We are just reducing their rights. We are just reducing the rights of the people who do those jobs. And guess what? If the next worker along from you has less rights, then you have less rights at work. You are screwed by that. So we need to talk about class, we need to talk about rights, and we need to not talk about numbers. Just say, I don't care about numbers. I don't care. And yeah, I mean, like, obviously, open border, I like to think of it this way in terms of open borders. Like, I don't believe that you should lose your rights to marry whoever you fall in love with, or change job if your employer's abusing you, or, I don't know, access support if you're sick because you crossed a border. I don't believe you should lose your rights when you cross a border. Now, people want to talk about control and numbers and so on. That's their own fantasy land they can live in. But you shouldn't lose your rights when you cross a border. That is where I think you can bring people on board to what is actually would represent a very radical change. But it doesn't sound that radical because it's actually pretty reasonable thing to say, that you shouldn't lose your rights when you cross a border. So that's how I try to frame a conversation about, like, radical border change. Did I miss anyone?
I feel like I did miss. I can't read my handwriting half the time. So did we miss something? A question?
Oh, there was a question at the.
Oh yeah, sorry. Say it again. Sorry, the legal.
Oh, about the right to work for asylum seekers and safe routes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot.
Why haven't they got the right to work?
Yeah. So interestingly, tomorrow I am going to be speaking at an event in Parliament where workers represented by the Public and Commercial Services Union, so who work for the Border Force, are presenting a new policy to MPs on safe routes for asylum seekers. So it's Border Force agents calling for safe routes to be put in place for asylum seekers. And it's a really, like, I've read the policy, it is really, really good and well thought through policy. Like, it's really, really powerful because I understand why a lot of people might conceive of those actors as the enemy, and in many ways they may behave as it. But there are many people who work for the Home Office, even in border enforcement and immigration enforcement, who actually don't want to be harming people every day. They want a job. Again, it goes back to, like, how most people actually just want the system to be managed well. They don't want chaos. They don't want people drowning in the channel. Most people want fairly reasonable things that we can all agree on. And I think it's a very powerful thing that the Border Force workers are calling for a safe route. So that's launching tomorrow. Again, follow me on everything because I'll be tweeting about it.
We should hear more about. I mean, why haven't we heard about that? I hope we'll have to push it. When it launches tomorrow, I'll share it everywhere and I'll share it with you. But, like, I think it's a really good way in, and I think, again, if we're just talking about, like, effectively impacting Labour right now, Labour do not want to be seen to be doing anything good for migrants. If you're asking them for safe routes, they won't do it. But Labour do want to be seen to be doing good things for workers. So the fact that it's the workers and the unionised workers who are calling for this is an effective way in. And again, I agree with you on asylum seekers' right to work. I mean, that's just, that one just seems so... There was a campaign on that, wasn't there? What happened?
Yeah. So it still exists. It's called Lift the Ban. It's a coalition of asylum support organisations and they did some brilliant research that shows that it would entirely pay for the asylum system and then some. And
then there was public support. Remember, they did some polling.
86%.
Yeah.
Like, everybody agrees that asylum seekers. Yeah. You put it like this: asylum seekers should work. Now everybody's with us, right? But obviously there are asylum seekers who cannot due to their trauma or their situation or whatever, and they should be supported. But many, many, many of them are desperate to, and of course they should be able to. It's mad that they can't, and they do it in other countries. Right, this is the insane thing, they talk about, like, oh, it will be a pull factor. Why are there not more asylum seekers then going to Spain where they can do that? In France, they can work after 9 months. But they're still crossing the channel to the UK, so maybe that's actually not what's bringing them here, right? I mean, Yeah. Well, actually, anywhere in the EU, after 9 months, you can work in the asylum system. In Spain, it's even after 6 months. In the UK... And people spend an average
What's happening?
of
What's
2
going
years.
on? Why won't they meet
Because
that?
because it's viewed as like that would be, then people would come who just wanted
Take
to
our
work.
jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just done.
All right, so we're running out of time. One thing I do like to end these meetings with a little bit of kind of what we do next and what you can get involved in. And obviously there's been a few things today in terms of remind me, what is it called? Patience.
Patients, not passports.
Patients, not passports, yes. And the anti-raid people, put your hands up so that people can come to you and get the QR code. What would you say? Where should we be putting our energies on this?
Right. I think, comes back to where's the left, right? And it's here. And you guys coming along tonight, like, it just shows me all I need to know. You guys are already joining in your community, having conversations about important issues, and just continue to do that. I mean, right now, I think pressuring Labour, just any election that you are close to or voting in, local council, all of this stuff, write to your Labour representatives, tell them why you're not voting for them, and say it's migration, please. Because like I keep saying,
and
we
Palestine
don't win. Yeah. But like if we don't win on the racism stuff, the Palestine stuff, the migration stuff, we can't win, and they have to get a scare from the left, because right now they're only scared from the right. But essentially, it's what I was saying. Like, don't expect we're not losing because we're not good at this, or we've done something wrong, or we failed at something. Like, they have the millionaires and the billionaire backers. We just have to keep continuing to believe we can have those conversations. We can relate to people as human beings. If you do follow me, I put out loads of stuff, and some of it is very mediocre. It really is. Like, you don't, not every conversation you have, not every action you take has to be perfect. Like, doing something is a million times better than not doing anything and just tweeting about how your politics are really good. Like, if it's coming along to these meetings, if it's whatever it is, if it's joining the anti-race group, if it's any small thing that you just get involved with and start doing, then you're doing it. You're already doing it. And like, that's what we have to do. It doesn't take, you don't have to be amazing and perfect and brilliant and confident. You just have to go ahead and join in.
Great. Someone's phone's going off. All right. Okay, thank you so much, Zoe. That was incredible. I'm so glad to... This is so helpful just to go through the facts. Even though I know that, it's just so helpful to have that conversation and to just pull apart some of what's happening now, and of course to think about what we can do. We had, just for those of you in the room that came quite a lot canvassing over the years, we lost a dear friend last week, Elaine Hoctor, who was just such a wonderful woman that used to come down from Wanstead all the time since 2018, 2019. Just lovely, and unfortunately she died of a stroke out of the blue. So we're a bit shocked by that, but just so that if people want to go to the funeral, I'll be going. It's on Wednesday, 2nd April at 3 p.m. Just come and talk to us about it. But it's really sad, and you know, over the years we do get close to each other, and we do feel like we're a community. And so it's nice to also be there and tell her family how important she was to us. Also, the by-election. Does someone want to say about what's going on? It's on Thursday. Okay, Rita, do you want to say something? And just to say, this was the seat, this is the council seat of Jazz Atwal. Most of you will know who that is. He's the very dodgy landlord who's become an MP, who was the leader of the council. So it's that seat, so it's amazing if the independent can beat Labour there, and she's doing really well. The Dorset conversations are going well. Rita, if you just want to read out the timings for people, if you can make it.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Zoe. This follows on really nicely from what you were saying in terms of actions that you can take, particularly against Labour. So this is really timely. So as Faiza said, the by-election is taking place this Thursday. The candidate, an independent who we're campaigning for, is Nur Jahan. She did actually stand against Jazz Atwal in the general election last year.
and she came second. She got almost 10,000 votes. So she's got a really good profile in the area, and she's the only person really who can beat Labour. So canvassing is taking place over all day. They have sort of like blocks into like 2-hour sessions from 10 until, I believe it's 10 till 9. The other thing to say is Labour has called this by-election at a really cynical time. So they've done it during Ramadan, because basically they're trying to suppress the Muslim vote. The ward there is around 50% Muslim, so they've been very sort of very sneaky about this, and we can't let them get away with it. So it's a grassroots campaign. They really do need the support. There's a group of us from Chingford and Woodford who've been going there over the last few weeks, and we can really see that they do really need the support on the ground. So anyone who wants to get involved, please come and see me. I've got a sign-up sheet, and they'll be really grateful, even just for a couple of hours this week. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rita. Yeah, keep an eye on the emails. There's a few, I'm just trying to work out the next couple of months in terms of speakers, but keep coming, keep telling other people about this. This is somewhere where progressive people belong, and this is a space where we can build and take action. So thank you for coming tonight, and see you next month, hopefully. Bye.